The Ugly Duckling. Author, illustrator, Michael Foreman. The presentation by me, S. Mazzanelli. This book contains many of our favorite classic fairy tales. On the left is the cover of the book, and on the right is the first page of this story, The Ugly Duckling. Book summary. A duck had built her nest and was waiting for her eggs to hatch. All eggs hatched on time but one. The one egg turned out to be the ugly duckling. They called him ugly because he looked drastically different from his mother and siblings. Every animal around the farmyard made fun of him for his appearance. He felt like a burden to his family because they were ashamed of him. This made him run away. The ugly duckling runs away, and on his journey he crosses a dog and hunters, a little hut, a crow, and a few flying swans. During his journey, he still feels unloved because everyone tells him that he's ugly and treats him like he's worthless. He then finally transforms and notices that he's been a beautiful swan this whole time. Everyone gives him love now and wants to associate with him. He's been the same person as before. He then appreciates his life much more since he's had to suffer so much before. It then ends by saying how he was happy but not proud. The color scheme. Michael Foreman used watercolors for his illustrations. The colors that were mainly used were blues, greens, yellows, pinks, grays, and a lot of browns. He didn't really use bright colors in his illustrations, but his colors still pop and make you want to look at them. These colors suggested the emotions and moods. The brown was used when the duckling felt sad or unloved and alone, and was mostly used when he ran away. The blue colors were used when he was crying or just upset. They used different tones of pinks and orange when he was at his happiest. This shows how well Michael Foreman used color to show emotion. These illustrations show that the duckling was going through a tough situation and he was just overall depressed. And as you can see in these two images, they use different shades of browns and grays and blacks and really make it look very sad and depressed. And even on the left, he gives him a bit of a hunch here just to show how sad he is, even by the way he walks and looks, and his emotion in his face also shows how upset he was during this time. Different shapes and pattern. Michael Foreman used many different shapes and pattern in the story, many of those shapes being squares, triangles, and circles. He mostly used line shapes by making one super straight and the other one more wavy-like. I realized that in these illustrations he made all of the other ducklings look much more neat and much more clean. He did this by using color and lines. He made the strokes of feather on the ugly duckling a bit more wild than he did for the little ducklings. This illustration shows how he made the ugly duckling look more sad and ugly by the way his feathers were shaped. So as you can see here, he looks much more scary and ugly in a way because of the way his feathers were. Much more wild and just not shaped well, just not neat looking like his siblings. Size portion. Each illustration had a square border around it. This made it possible for the author to write more words around it and describe what were occurring in those illustrations. Michael Foreman put an illustration in almost every page or every other page, making this a much more enjoyable read for a child. His illustrations had a lot going on, so the size didn't matter as much because the point of the illustrations were definitely made. Characters. The illustrator wanted the animals in the story to look more realistic. I can see that he was more drawn to a realistic version instead of a cartoony Disney type of art style. The ugly duckling looked, in fact, ugly and not cute, like the Disney version. There was a noticeable difference between the ugly duckling and his siblings. The ugly duckling was a cygnet. In my opinion, are realistically cute, and his siblings were ducks. The color was very right for the cygnet, so were the shapes. None of the animals in the story were drawn disproportionate. They looked mostly normal-like. The only thing was that Michael Foreman made the ugly duckling a little too ugly. He really wanted to get that point across. Illustrations. There weren't any repeated illustrations, but instead repeated colors. He used the same 4 colors, I feel like. When the duckling was sad, brown was for sure his go-to color choice. He used a dark blue twice when the duckling was sad, miserable, and crying. He used pinks multiple times, so that the duckling was at peace or was actually happy. Point of view. The ugly duckling was definitely, for sure, the main character. We get to know him on a deeper level than any other character in the book. The story revolves around him and his life experience. This book was in third person, suggesting that all characters played their role in the story, pretty much the role that was needed for the story. Happy ending? The ending of The Ugly Duckling is one of my favorites because we all know how it usually goes. He finally realizes that he's been beautiful this whole time, even after everybody else saw how beautiful he was. He remained the same inside because he was always important and always outshined. Gives a lesson. If you have a kind heart, you'll always outshine the rest. Being beautiful on the inside is more important, even if you don't realize it. And then I added the illustration that was used in the last page of this story. I think it was the most beautiful because of how it showed the duckling's transformation to a beautiful swan. And that is my presentation. Thank you very much.